have you told your friends that you see ghosts?
Oh, absolutely not.
Gina Rodriguez returns in Not Dead Yet.
I'm back, baby.
Who is that?
Oh, she's the obituary writer.
And Brad Garrett joins the brilliant ensemble cast.
Titan, Maverick, Titan of all Mavericks. These are all words used to describe me.
Not Dead Yet. Season premiere. Tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
Hi, everyone. Just before we start today's podcast, I wanted to jump in with a quick message for parents of teenagers. And I want to choose my words very carefully. I don't want to talk about geopolitics. I don't want to talk about world history, Middle Eastern conflict. I don't know enough about all of that to make any comments about people and races, other than to say that you're probably aware that there's a war going on in the Middle East and that some of the things that are occurring over there are appalling, atrocious, and horrifying. Now, this is something that a lot of people have very, very strong opinions about, and I do too. But the purpose of this quick message is not to get involved in what's going on, but rather to encourage you to help your kids to be safe. Over the next few days, there's a very strong possibility that Hamas is going to broadcast executions, that they're going to share on TikTok and other social media platforms different forms of torture and pain being inflicted upon those who they've captured as hostages. And if your children are on social media, there is a chance that they may be exposed to some of that. The algorithms pass stuff around the world very, very fast. So this very quick message is simply to say this. There are some things happening right now that are awful, number one. Number two, if your children are on social media, there is a chance that they may be exposed to that content. That's number two. And so number three, my encouragement would be that you spend some time chatting with them briefly about what's going on, about what your concerns are, and then work with them on a solution that can keep them safe. You might use the 3 E's. Let me add a fourth E. E number one, explain what you know about what's happening. E number two, explore how they feel about it and how they would feel if they were exposed to that content online. E number three, empower them to make decisions that will keep them safe. And E number four, encourage them. Encourage them to talk to you if anything comes into their feeds that could be harmful to their well-being and their psychology. Now, let's move into the podcast.
It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
All this week, we have been talking about those tricky times in family life, making mornings magic, what to do about lunch boxes and dinner times and creating margin. Today, the trickiest time, crunch time. The crunchiest of the crunches that we have in family life. Makes family life sound hard, doesn't it, this week? But it can be. Today, we're talking about my mum. I don't even want to say the words. My mum used to call it arsenic hour. Arsenic hour.
It's pretty hard going.
Is that like...
If it hits hard in your house, it feels like arsenic
I'm so
hour.
done with the kids that I'm going to give them poison.
No, I don't think it's them
Right.
you're giving it to.
It's
I
for
think
you.
we're really ready to take it at that point.
Maybe that's what it is.
Anything to stop.
You didn't call it that. My mum called it arsenic hour. I think she got it from her mum. You called it...
Witching hour.
when the children become...
Little witches.
Right. So it doesn't seem to apply to all children. It seems to, or kids grow out of it. Like the witching hour, it starts about 5 p.m. for little kids and continues through until almost bedtime, really. They grow out of it at what age, would you say? Somewhere
Look,
around
8.
I was going to say
10.
I was going to say 10.
It really just
yeah.
depends on their ability to emotion regulate.
That's really at the core of it. There's an acronym that I use all the time to highlight why the kids are going to be cranky. I mean, kids are cranky because of an unmet need, but usually you can compartmentalize it into one of 5 things. Remember the acronym HALTS, like the German police officer halts you, asks you to stop. So H is for hungry, A is for angry, L is for lonely, T is for tired, and S is for stressed. And by 5 p.m. most afternoons, our children under about the age of 8 or 9 I'm feeling all 5 of those things. Like,
Can you put an O in there somewhere? I think overstimulation has to be one of those things.
Holtzo. Holtz. Let's do
Because
that.
I think for a lot of our kids, that's what we're dealing with. After a massive day at preschool or
Big school. Yep.
there's just an overstimulation.
I remember back in the early days of our marriage, I'm going back a little over 20 years now, I would get home from work maybe 7:30 at night. I was a radio announcer at 4RO Rockhampton, and I'd be on air from 2 till 7, jump in the car, drive back to Yeppoon, and then I would walk in the door and our baby girl was just screaming. It was the witching hour. It was horrendous.
It was more than an hour. It would go for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah. But I would take that
I
baby
wonder
off
if
you.
now we went through that process again, whether it would have been as intense. But as new parents and quite young, it all felt a little bit overwhelming.
I would walk that baby in a pram or on my shoulder for an hour and a half every night around the neighbourhood.
You got the best hour of the night.
She was so peaceful and quiet.
So peaceful as soon as you got her outside. And she's still the same today, 23 years later. She
get her
loves
outside.
being outside.
I think that there's something in that for all parents. Kids like outside.
But the night that stands out to me the most when it comes to witching hour
The witchiest of all the witchy hours.
was actually a really major turning point for our family. You'd been at university studying all of these amazing principles and ideas about how families work and just how to be a better dad specifically. And I had been dealing with just not witching hour. It had been a day. It had been a really, really hard day. I had a 4-year-old, a 1-year-old, and I was heavily pregnant. Like I was just about to pop with baby number 3. But our 1-year-old had been at my feet for most of the day, pretty much just crying. There was nothing I could do. Every time I kind of tried to give her cuddles or whatever, she didn't want that. She just wanted to scream at my legs. And I was at my wit's end. You walked in the door probably about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night.
I think I remember this particular night, and if I remember correctly, it was dark. It was later than that. I think it was around 8 o'clock. And the kids should have been in bed. And instead I drove up the driveway and all the lights in the whole house were on and I can hear 2 kids screaming. And I've walked in and the house was not how – I mean, you always had presentation plus in our house, but the house was just a schmozzle. And
I was at the stove trying to cook
dinner at like 8 o'clock at night and the kids were crying. And if this is the night that I'm thinking of, it was horrible.
And I was literally, I was falling to pieces. I looked at you and I just said, you need to take these kids or else I'm going to do something I'll regret. Like I was beside myself.
And I think I said something really intelligent like, it looks like you've had a really tough day.
You did.
How can I help? And that's when you yelled at me and said, you need to take the kids. And then you went to the bedroom and slammed the door. And over the next maybe half an hour or so, I finished off dinner. I got some food in the kids' bellies. I put them to sleep. I was tidying up while all of this was happening. Everything calmed down. I went and sat with you and said, do you want to talk about it or do you just want me to give you some space? And I think you got cranky at me.
I was pretty frustrated.
Because I nailed it. And you were like, how does he do that?
But the thing that stood out the most to me in that whole experience wasn't the full 30 minutes. It was literally the first few lines that you said after I left the room. You got down to our little 1-year-old's level and you literally just looked at her and said, you've had a really hard day. And I'm assuming because everything calmed after that moment, I'm assuming she kind of fell into you and just was like, somebody understands. It's hard. And when I look back at that experience, what I see is, for me, I needed somebody to say to me, it looks like you've had a really hard day.
Well, I did, but you were pretty cranky about it.
Yeah, I needed it about 4 hours earlier.
Yeah.
And just how powerful it was for a child, even at that young age, to have someone recognize her heart. And that was the turning point for our family. And for me, recognizing that there were things that you were learning in your studies that was really impactful in the way our family would function moving forward.
After the break, 3 things we can do to overcome the challenges of the witching hour.
Well, I think when you unpack my story, you'll recognize there are 3 specific things that we could have done.
Easily
I could
3.
have done specifically.
Oh, no, this is a team thing, honey. It's we. But if you're doing it on your own, 3 things that you can do.
That would have completely revolutionized the way I handled the night. The kids still may have lost the plot. It still would have been hard, but these 3 principles will help you in moving forward in really positive ways.
So the first thing that I'm going to go with is just have stuff ready. Have stuff ready, whether it's having a meal plan, and we've talked about that this week, or having dinner pre-prepped. Maybe you did it on the weekend before, or you've got stuff in the fridge that's ready to go. Having stuff ready.
But also having activities for your kids to do during that time. If you start dinner at 5 o'clock, is there a few little activities that you could have out for the kids that they love doing and they can kind of self-direct themselves through? But they're things that aren't out all the time.
That ties in also with an additional element to this, and that's just having schedule and routine, right? So cooking dinner at 8 o'clock at night, clearly the schedule wasn't being kept to, the routine was out the window, everything had gone pear-shaped, the bottom had fallen out. When you've got a schedule and routine, you've done that prep. I mean, we're talking about when everything's going perfectly, and no family is ever this perfect all the time. But those couple of things, so useful. And I'm also going to add, especially if you're at home on your own with little kids and you open the fridge and realize that, oh my goodness, a couple of things aren't here that I need. There's outsourcing available. Like there are people who are available on the internet who can go and get stuff for you so that you can stay at home and keep the routine going as best you can. Outsource, outsource, outsource. I remember back at one point for maybe 6 months in our family's history when things were just really chaotic for us, we had a friend. We paid for this, but we had a friend who, when she was cooking her meals, she doubled the batch and cooked meals for us as well. And so for about 6 months, we got 4 meals a week from a friend. And I think whatever it was that we paid, it was not that much really, because she was happy to do it. She knew that it was helping. It was supplying a bit of extra income for her. And at the time, it wasn't killing us either. Like it just worked. The outsourcing was such a great way to get this done.
Where do I find her again?
I know. We've moved and she's not available. Second big idea, keep yourself regulated. Keep yourself regulated.
And I guess this is where self-care really plays a huge part. If we're not taking care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, and physically, then it's really hard at the end of the day when our kids are losing the plot to not feel like we're one of the kids who are losing the plot.
It's switching out because we're the ones. So getting enough of the right food, sleeping enough, moving your body enough, all those kinds of things. But also just like setting yourself, you know how you, if you're about to wrestle with somebody, even if it's the kids, you get your feet planted, you get your shoulders squared up and you get ready to grab those kids and wrestle them. You kind of get your foundation ready so that you're stable. In some ways, you kind of mentally want to do that before the witching hour begins, right? You sort of pause, take stock, get the list together and say, all right, here's the schedule, here's the structure, here's what I've got to do, take a deep breath, let's go.
20 plus years ago, self-care was definitely on the table, but it wasn't something that was hugely talked about or dealt with. And just the difference that would have made for young mums who are at home and feel like they don't have any time to themselves, witching hour can feel so overwhelming.
Last thing, make yourself available as much as you can, which sounds so unfair to say, but we've done this with 6 kids now. We've been there. And there's something amazing that happens when you invite the kids into your space or when you get into their space, being emotionally available.
And at the other end of the spectrum, it's amazing how quickly things go downhill when we're checking our emails, we're on the phone to our friend, or we're playing a game or, kind of watching Netflix or whatever. Our kids know when we're available and when we're not. And they seem to kind of have those big emotions when they don't feel like they can reach us.
This week, it's been all about the crunch times in family life. We think that this is the crunchiest of all the crunch times. We hope that our ideas are helpful and that your family feels happy and safe as a result of what we've talked about today. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.